Good morning and welcome to the class. In our last few classes, we learnt about the reproduction in higher plants, where the higher plants would undergo sexual reproduction. We saw when there is fruit formation, when there is a seed formation, what actually makes the seed to be formed there, what is pollination, types of pollination, and so on. So, if plants have developed sexual reproduction as a means to show diversity, at the same time to show some kind of resemblance to the parents, right? Don't you think that animals also would have some method of evolving where they resemble the parents, but at the same time there has to be a chance for showing some kind of differences? Obviously, yes, right? So, in this particular chapter, we are going to start learning about human reproductive system. Now, you might be wondering why human of all the animals. Now, the first and foremost thing is because human reproduction is obviously one of our systems, and we should know the importance of that system. Not only that, as a science, we get to know more about how actually reproduction happens in case of humans. That is one reason. The second important thing about human reproduction is that these are considered to have one of the highest, highly evolved method of reproduction. You see that, the synchrony that we were talking in case of plants, you know, is so well structured and maintained in all the vertebrates, and more so in case of mammals. So humans being mammals, we are going to learn about some of the important mechanisms, important phenomenon, at the same time important conditions that are required for the reproduction to happen. Right now, to start off with, let us say that humans can reproduce only by sexual method. Okay, uh, in the case of plants, I was telling you that a banana can produce seed, but you see that it can also vegetatively propagate. Now that kind of ability of producing both in sexual and asexual way is lost in higher animals. So in the case of higher animals, you see that there is only sexual reproduction, and humans basically are sexually reproducing organisms. The second important thing that we should know is, we are a class of vertebrates. I'm sure you would remember what we have learned in our last class. So we are vertebrates, and we belong to the class of mammals. And we, when we're talking about the reproduction, we are essentially viviparous. Viviparous means that there is, the young ones which is given birth to, and the young one is taken care of by the mother, right? So the mother takes care of the newly born young ones up to certain time by nourishing the young ones, and we do not lay eggs, right? We give birth to young ones, and hence viviparous is the term where we use to depict all this, right? So basically, we are talking about one such organism where there is sexual reproduction, viviparous in nature. Okay, now let us just try to find out what are the events that are involved in this sexual reproduction. Okay, so there are so many events obviously that would have to happen. So like in the case of plants, we saw that there has to be um, microsporogenesis, megasporogenesis, then pollination, then fertilization, which we call as syngamy, and then there was post fertilization events. So similarly, we have many events that would happen even in this case. Okay, so the first and the foremost step in reproduction is a process which we call as the gametogenesis. Gametogenesis is basically a process where the gametes are formed, right? So there are two types of gametes. We have the male gamete, we have the female gamete. So gametogenesis happens in the first place. So you know that we have male and female. So in the males there would be production of sperms, in the females there is production of the egg, right? Then comes our next part, which is called as the insemination. Insemination, uh, this should be I, insemination. Now insemination basically means a very much similar process as we saw in the plants where it was pollination. So here there is transfer of the male gamete to the female gamete, okay, not to the female gamete but to the place very close to where the female gamete is there. So that is what we call as insemination. And then third important process is the fertilization. This is the next step where you see that there is fusion of the male gamete and the female gamete, right? And after this fertilization happens, I'm sure you know that there is formation of a zygote. Now this zygote would undergo development, okay? So after fertilization, I would write the next step here. After fertilization, the next step is the development of the zygote, okay? But please do remember, we are talking about the viviparous condition where it is not the formation of the egg, that this organism has to develop into a new baby, new child, right? And therefore it has to get the nourishment, it has to kind of get itself attached to the mother's wall, right? So that in this development we call it as one stage, which is called as the implantation, okay? So development happens where the cell increases in size, increases in number. Now this will go and bind itself to one of the reproductive structures of the female body, which is called as the uterus. So it goes and attaches itself to the uterus, and this process is what we call as implantation. Now after implantation is well done, you see that the growing embryo gets all the nourishment, gets all the things, nutrients that is required for its growth, and then you see this then there is development that would happen, okay? So we have the embryo that would develop, and this is what we call as the gestation, okay? This is what we call as the gestation. Now here this development, I would write it as the blastocyst development. This is the blastocyst development, and then we have this as the embryonic development. Now after embryonic development happens, what you see is that the baby comes out of the mother's womb, which is called as the parturition, which is called as the parturition. So these are some of the steps that are involved in sexual reproduction of humans, right? Looks very complicated, but actually speaking, this is one of the miracles of the entire animal kingdom, where you see there is sexual reproduction, okay? Somehow there would be formation of gametes which would fuse together and give rise to the new young ones developing inside, right? Now though we have all these steps, okay, you see that the processes that are involved here in the formation of a young one is not very simple or very easy, okay? You see that there is a lot of differences between the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system, right? So we need to understand basically the structure of the reproductive systems of both the male and the female. So let us start doing and learning about the reproductive system. Okay, uh, so these diagrams are actually supposed to be written on the board, and you have to practice them because in your examination you are supposed to write them. But here, just to see that uh, we can save some time, I'm just showing the pictures on the board. So this is the structure of the male reproductive system. The male reproductive system, and both in the male and the female uh, reproductive systems, you see that they are present below the pelvis region, okay, near the pelvic region. You see that there is the male as well as the female reproductive system. Now, what does this male reproductive system has? Now, the male reproductive system has uh, so many components, okay. So, let us see what they are. Okay, the first and the foremost thing that it has is a pair of it has a pair of testes. Okay, testis is a very important organ. uh, we will get to know more about that once we go in detail. Okay, so it has a pair of testes. Then along with that, it also has accessory pair of ducts, or we will just call it as accessory ducts. Sorry, there, accessory ducts. And then we have certain glands that are present here, and also we have the external genitalia. Okay, so the male reproductive system has these components. Okay, now let us see what is each one here. So we have the first one, which is called as the testis. Now, testis is very important part of testis is a very important part of the male reproductive system, and this is outside the abdominal cavity. Okay, you can see that the pair of testis is actually present in a sac like structure. Okay, it's outside the body, and that is what we call as the scrotum. Scrotum is nothing but the sac. It's called as the scrotal sac. Scrotal sac is there, and the scrotal sac is present outside the body. And you also notice that this scrotal sac helps to maintain low temperature of the testis. You know, our body temperature is 37 degrees. You see that the scrotal sac's temperature is always around 2 to 3 degrees lower than the normal internal body temperature. Okay, now why do you think that the testis has to be outside the body in a special sac like structure? Now it has to be like that because only when the temperature is low there can be spermatogenesis. Okay, for spermatogenesis to happen, it has to be in a slightly lower temperature. Okay, now in adults, you see that the testis is more or less oval in shape, and it is around 4 to 5 centimeters. Okay, it's a small 4 to 5 centimeter oval shaped structure, around 2 to 3 centimeters of width. Okay, now what is very important is that this testis is having a very strong, very dense covering. Okay, it has a very dense covering, and you see that if you just look at the testis, I will show you the next picture. If you just look at this testis here, you see that this has so many small compartments. Okay, it has so many compartments, and they are called as the testicular lobules. What do we call them as? We call them as the testicular lobules. So you can just see this picture here. You can see that there are small tiny pouch like structures. Now these small compartment or the small areas within the testis are what we call as the testicular lobules. Okay. Now if you just take one of these lobules and magnify that and see, you see that these look like some kind of coiled structures. Let me just write it here itself. Okay, so if I take one of the testicular lobule and I'm going to magnify them, I see different types of tube like structures. Okay, now they are what we call as the seminiferous tubules. What do we call that as? We call it as the seminiferous tubules. Okay, now seminiferous tubules are uh, very important tubules because inside the testis, inside the testicular lobules, we have the seminiferous tubules, and this seminiferous tubules has one kind of cell which we call as the male germ cell. Okay, we call this as the male germ cell, and this male germ cells have are kind of lining inside the seminiferous tubules, and these are the ones which would undergo meiotic division to finally give, sperm cells. Okay, so which is giving male germ cells, male sperm cells, they come from the male germ cells. And where are they? They are present inside the seminiferous tubules. But please look at this here. Sperm cells, we will talk about the structure of the sperm later. But you see, the sperm cell also needs some kind of nutrition to survive. Yes or no? Obviously, yes. Now, if they want nutrition, there has to be something, some other cell which is giving them nutrition, right? Now, just inside the seminiferous tubules, along with male germ cell, there are one more set of cells. Okay, one more set of cells which are called as the Sertoli cells. Okay, now Sertoli cells are those cells which kind of protect this male germ cells, which protect the sperms also. They provide enough nutrition and all this, right? So these are the important part of our seminiferous tubules. Okay, now you see the tubules here, right? Now outside the tubules there are one more set of cells. Okay, just outside this seminiferous tubules, lining the outer layer of the seminiferous tubules, we have one more set of cells, which this is inside. And then if I talk about outside, let me say I will write it outside here. Outside we have one more set of cells which are called as the Leydig cells. Okay, Leydig cells are very important because these are the ones which secrete the hormones, especially the male hormones. The male hormones are called as androgens, right? So they are produced here in the Leydig cells. So Leydig cells synthesize, they secrete testicular hormones which are called as the androgens. Okay, not only Leydig cells, you also see many other types of cells which kind of protect the whole of the testis. Okay, so we have these also present in the testis region, right? So just to give you an completion of this, we have the pair of testis. Testis has is inside the scrotum, has testicular lobules which has two types of cells, the male germ cell and the Sertoli cells. Outside the seminiferous tubules, you have the testiculating cells or the interstitial cells, and they secrete hormones, right? Along with that, there are many other important cells which protect the testis in the interstitial region, right? So this is about the first component of the male reproductive system, which is the testis. So we have a pair of testes. Now let us talk about something that we call as the accessory ducts. Okay, let us talk about the accessory ducts. Now, accessory, see, basically duct is something like pipe. These are actually helping for something to be transferred from one region to other region, right? So there are certain ducts, certain pipes which are important to carry the sperm which is present inside the testicular lobule to come out of the body, right? So that is facilitated by the accessory ducts. Now there are around 3 to 4, 4 specifically accessory ducts. Okay, now they are the first one, which is called as the reed testis. Then we have the second one, which is called as the vas efferentia. So the one which is going up here, which is called as the vas efferentia. Then we have the third one, which is called as epididymis. Epididymis, and then the last gland, which actually last duct, is what we call as the vas deferens. Okay, so how are the sperms sent out of the body? Okay, so first important duct that plays a role is the red testis. Okay, red testis is a very small duct like structure which is coming out of the testicular lobules. Okay, now this red testis opens into this tubule which is called as the vas efferentia. So vas efferentia, it is the duct which carries the sperm cell through the red testis. Okay, now this vas efferentia, it comes out of the testis. Okay, you see that it is coming out of the testis here, and it opens into a slightly larger tube like structure which is called as the epididymis. Now epididymis is present in the posterior surface of the posterior surface is nothing but the back side. So it is present back side of the testis. Okay, so it is present back side of the testis. So there is this posterior surface on which there is epididymis. Now this epididymis, finally you see that it gets connected backwards, and you see that it connects into this one of the biggest tubule which is called as the vas deferens, right? It goes into the vas deferens. Now as it goes into the vas deferens, you see that this tubule enters into the abdomen. See, all this time it was in the scrotal sac, now it goes into the abdomen. Now as it goes into the abdomen, okay, it goes into the abdomen, you see that it is very closely associated with the urinary bladder. So it kind of loops around the urinary bladder, and then it gets one duct from the seminal vesicle. Okay, here in this vas deferens, you see that there is one seminal vesicle. Now there is this seminal vesicle also, which is very important, uh, opens into urethra, that is as actually acting as the ejaculatory duct. Okay, that is actually acting as the ejaculatory duct. Maybe if you see this picture, uh, it would be easier for you to understand. So there is this vas deferens, it goes into the urinary loop like this, it goes into the urinary loop, urinary bladder, and then you see that there is this small duct here which is called as the ejaculatory duct, and through the ejaculatory duct it passes through the other part of the male reproductive system, right? So you see that it comes to the urinary bladder, then from the seminal vesicle it gets one duct, and it opens into the urethra as the ejaculatory duct. So it gets opening into the urinary duct there, and then you see that the sperms which are formed in the process, right, which are formed in the from the germ cell, which have traveled till that ejaculatory duct, they are all stored in that region, in that ejaculatory duct. It stores there for some time, okay, and then it comes out through the urethra itself, okay. It comes to the urinary bladder, okay. A urinary bladder, urethra originates from the urinary bladder. So you see that the urinary bladder, or the urethra maybe to be very specific, joins with the ejaculatory duct, and then you see that it extends into the penis, where there is a opening which is called as the urethral meatus. So through the urethral meatus, you see that the sperms comes out of the body, right. So this is how we have so many accessory ducts. Just to give you one quick review of all the accessory ducts: from the testicular lobules, it goes into the rete testis. From there it comes to vas efferentia, goes to the posterior part of it, which is called as the epididymis, and then reaches out into the vas deferens. The vas deferens goes out, loops the entire urinary bladder, and gets connected to the duct which is called as the ejaculatory duct. The semen gets, the sperms, the solution which has all this, uh, you know, cells, is stored in the ejaculatory duct, and at the right time, the ejaculatory duct opens into the urethra. From the urethra, it gets attached to the penis, and comes out of the body, right. So this is how we have so many types of ducts which actually associate the movement of the germ cell. Now let us talk about the different glands. Now glands, there are so many glands that are very important for the well functioning of the male reproductive system. Okay, we have the glands like the seminal vesicles. Okay, we have a gland which is called as the seminal vesicles, and then we have another gland which is called as the prostate gland, and then there is also one more which is called as the bulbourethral gland. So these are the three different glands that you see. So you can see the seminal vesicles, which are very important because they are the germ cell region, and they obviously have to have certain androgens that are produced, which are in this region, the seminal vesicles. Then we have one region which is called as the prostate gland, and then you have the bulbourethral gland in this region. Okay, now all these three glands secrete certain fluids. Okay, they secrete certain fluids, and that is what we call as the seminal plasma. We call that as the seminal plasma. Seminal plasma is very important. You see that it is rich in fructose, it is rich in calcium, rich in many other enzymes. Okay, and also the secretion from the bulbourethral gland has certain mucus type of secretion which helps in the lubrication of the penis as well. So this way, all these glands are very important for a normal male reproductive system. They have to be working. Now talking about the last part of the male reproductive system, we have the external genitalia. So we consider the penis as the male external genitalia. Okay, it is very important because it is through this penis that there is insemination possible, right? The transfer of the gamete towards to the female gamete. Okay, so there is the enlarged part of the penis which is slightly enlarged, we call that as the glans penis. Okay, and this is considered to be quite sensitive, and hence it is having a covering of the skin which is called as the foreskin. Now with all this system in place, we have to see that how exactly our seminiferous tubule looks like, right? Because that is exactly the site where semen are actually formed. So our seminiferous tubules would look very much like this. In our seminiferous tubules, you see that there is spermatogenesis happening, or the formation of the sperms, and you have one region here, this is the seminiferous tubule. You can see that there are some regions in the pink here which are not part of the seminiferous tubules, and we call that as the interstitial cells, which are also called as the Leydig cells. Interstitial cells or the Leydig cells. So these are the ones which secrete androgens. Now when the androgens are secreted, you see that they would get inside, and there are so many germ cells, male germ cells, that are present, and these germ cells would receive the androgens, would get mature, and hence would form the sperms. Okay, these are called as the spermatozoa. Okay, spermatozoa are nothing but the sperm, and the cells which give rise to these sperms are called as the male germ cells, which are also called as the spermatogonia. So we have the sperms which comes out here, and this sperms passes through the tubules like the reed testis, and then passes out into vas deferens and comes out as a secretion from all the reproductive system, glands, from the ducts and so on, which is called as the seminal plasma, right? So this is about how the male reproductive system is formed, right? So now once we know about the male reproductive system, the next thing that we should know is the female reproductive system, which of course we will see it in our next class. See you till then. Any doubts, please do make a note of it. We will discuss in our live class.